folks, and welcome back to another episode of Friday Night Spotlight, brought to you by 911 Air Repair, your local air conditioning expert specializing in maintenance, repair, and new installations. Well, you guys weren't here for our pre-show talk, but the general consensus for this week's episode is we're just gonna wing it because we're at that point in the season where our smaller schools just have this week and next week before playoffs start, while our bigger schools have that additional week going on. So we're kind of in limbo right now. Instead of talking repeatedly over and over about the same couple of teams, we're just gonna give you guys a general idea of how the season has gone and just kind of what we're expecting looking ahead towards these next couple of weeks. Kind of our the good, bad, and the ugly segment, I guess you could call it, like we did a couple seasons ago for our spring sports. So, David, what are some of the surprises that have stood out to you so far this season?
Surprises for me so far has just kind of been, I'm going to go to our home base, which is Casa Grande Union. Surprises in the sense of they started out really hot, but then as soon as they got to the really tough teams, they kind of folded a little bit. And it's that this is a little bit expected in the sense of, they're coming off of it with a new quarterback in Luke Keaton, who is playing his first real varsity snaps of his career. He's only a junior, and he's really hasn't had that much experience so far after they lost El Tornegan to transfers. So it's been a little bit of an up and down season, but they still hold their own destiny. They have it's a pretty easy schedule throughout the rest of the season. They just got a big win last week, their first in 3 weeks. They faced a gauntlet of teams in those last 3 weeks, so it's really going to come down to, can they finish out the rest of the season strong and possibly land a spot in the playoffs? They just have to be in the top 16. And especially with how the Open is looking, a lot of 5A teams are going to be in that Open. So if anything, they could even finish outside of that top 16 and have themselves bump up a little bit to help their case. So it could just depend on where they are, where they're matched up. So they're just, at the end of the day, you just have to win out and hope for the best. So that's kind of been my surprises as well. We talked about them a lot as well. A.L.A. Ironwood is also another good pick for me. Aiden Williams, one of the best running backs in the state, regardless of conference, regardless of how big your school is. I think Aiden Williams is an absolute fantastic talent for this team. I wish I could have seen more of Maricopa so far this year. I want to talk about them just slightly. It feels like we haven't really given them their flowers for being able to do what they can, but at the same time, I feel like they should be seeing more. They have an above-average quarterback in Jose Cardona, but at the end of the day, it's not just him. He has to have a team around him, and I just don't know if they have all the pieces just yet. I hope to see more from them. It may be a conversation about, are they in the right conference? 5A could be a little bit tough on them, so maybe a move to 4A could be beneficial, but we'll have to wait and see if that happens with the AIA. So those are kind of my 3 teams that I've been kind of looking for more towards, but also expecting a lot more from them.
All right, so I'm going to hit the opposite end of the spectrum here, and we got to talk about Coolidge. First-year head coach Carlo Hernandez has come in this season, and he's built quite up the legendary reputation at Coolidge with previous state title runs and being in just the championship game. However, this season the Bears are 0-9, unfortunately. They've only scored in 2 games these past couple of weeks, and that's not really what I expected from them. I figured, a new head coach is coming in, but usually the team is already cohesive. It's just trying to implement to the new coaching styles, their philosophies and everything, but it's been just a really difficult mesh all around between the guys, the coaching staff, and everything. I got to give them their kudos for just sticking it out. I mean, hey, going 0-9 is a difficult thing, but for them to show up every single week and just keep putting in the work, that says a lot. Jumping ahead to another team, I got to talk about Sequoia Pathway, also in a similar position, a new head coach. The Pumas are currently 1-7. Their 7 games have all been shutout losses. But again, last year, we didn't see the Pumas make it this far into the season because they just flat out quit on their coach, whatever was going on there. But hey, they've stuck it out this season. Head coach Brandon Payne is doing something right for having these guys stick around and stay in Maricopa. Another new head coach with the program is at Desert Sunrise and Stephen Beard. They're doing a little bit better job. They are 2-5 this season. They haven't been shut out, and they are facing a juggernaut of a schedule in the region, going up against Vista Grande, Arizona College Prep, Arcadia. All of these are the top 10 teams, more or less, in the 4A conference. So, hey, I got to commend all 3 of these teams for just sticking it out and showing up every day. Jumping ahead a little bit to some of our potential playoff teams, which we will be talking more as the weeks go on. David, what are you kind of imagining as far as the playoff picture goes?
I think it's kind of come down to just a few teams for us. Santa Cruz Valley's at the top of that list just because of how good they've been so far in 2A. Their only loss is against the number one team in 2A, which is Santan Charter. And even then, it wasn't a bad game. They were competitive. They just made a little bit too many mistakes. So if they can clean those up, that could be a matchup that we see later in the 2A playoffs. I think they can breeze through the rest of their schedule. They really only have one real tough opponent coming up next, which is possibly Pima. That could be a tough game for them. But I still think this is a very high-powered offense mixed with a very scrappy defense. This team doesn't have a lot of size. They kind of focus more on speed and focus more on just being an athletic group, and I think that's going to be what carries them forward. On the 3A conference, we got Florence. Florence has been a really solid team. They've been a little bit unfortunate in the sense of the rankings, just for things that weren't even in their control. We talked about it a few weeks ago. The AA just kind of decided that since you're not playing, we're going to bump you down in the rankings, but don't expect that to stay the course. They just had a loss last week against a really tough team, so we'll have to see how they bounce back. Vista Grande is in the mix as well. Vista Grande is a solid team as well in 4A, so just expect them to kind of continue to stack up some wins and see where they end up. And then, like I mentioned earlier, it's going to come down to Casa Grande and 5A. I think they could possibly make that, especially how I mentioned with the Open, how it's set up right now. They could still be in there. So there's a lot of good teams. And then also ALA Ironwood, like I mentioned before, they're also a solid team. I think they're still ranked in the top 10 right now. So expect them to kind of continue to rack up some wins and see what they can do. So we got a number of good teams that could land in the playoffs, but it just comes down to who are going to be our actual, real true championship contenders. And I think we only really have two, which could be Florence and Santa Cruz Valley. So we'll see how that stacks up throughout the rest of the season.
So, going off of what David said here, just looking at their final matchups of the regular season, Santa Cruz is facing Pima. Pima right now is a top 8 team. So, depending on how that one turns out, hey, it's going to depend on which two of these teams remain in that top 8 spot and are able to host. Same thing goes for the 3A conference. Last game of the season is Florence and ALA Ironwood. Both of these teams right now, ALA Ironwood is ranked number 6, Florence is number 8. Hey, that game is going to be for a top 8 spot. Who's going to be hosting and who possibly is going to be an away team? And then looking at 4A, again, final game of the season, Vista Grande and Combs. Combs is one of our bubble teams right now. They are currently number 17. They've kind of been hanging around that number 15, 16, 17 spot. This is going to be a really big game for Vista Grande. It comes down to this week on Friday. They are playing at Gilbert Mesquite. This is that game that has haunted them all season long because last year this is the game they overlooked. They didn't pay so much attention to Mesquite. They went in there thinking, hey, we got this in the bag, and it was quite the opposite. And because Mesquite was ranked so low, that bumped Vista Grande out of playoff contention. So it all comes down to Vista Grande for this week. Comes that final matchup of the season. Can they come out with the win or just make it competitive? Because it's all going to depend on how they do. Because, hey, we all know this. Nobody knows the formula to the AIA power rankings. Nobody knows how this works. So we could be completely wrong with what we're talking about, but we don't know. Anyways, that has been our Winging It episode for this week. As always, here are our picks, and be sure to check us out next season when we're back to our regular Game of the Week schedule.